to share a little neuroscience tidbit.
Love it.
But I think it's one that you'll appreciate. Most people don't know this, but there's a brain structure called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. But what's interesting about this brain area is there are now a lot of data in humans showing that when people do something they don't want to do, like add 3 hours of exercise per day or per week, or when people who are trying to diet and lose weight resist eating something.
Right.
When people do anything that they don't want to do,
Right.
It's not about adding more work, it's about adding more work that you don't want to do.
Yes.
This brain area gets bigger.
Yep.
Now, here's what's especially interesting about this brain area to me. And by the way, I'm only learning this recently because it's new data, but there's a lot of it. The anterior mid-cingulate cortex is smaller in obese people. It gets bigger when they diet. It's larger in athletes. It's especially large or grows larger in people that see themselves as challenged and overcome some challenge.
Right.
And in people that live a very long time, this area keeps its size. In many ways, scientists are starting to think of the anterior mid-cingulate cortex not just as one of the seats of willpower,
Right.
but perhaps actually the seat of the will to live. And when I learned about the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, I was like almost out of my seat. And I've been in the neuroscience game since I was 20.
Now
we're the
we're
same
talking.
age. And I was so pumped because I've heard of the amygdala, fear, prefrontal cortex, it's planning and action. I could tell you every brain area and I teach neuroanatomy to medical students. But when I started seeing the data on the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, I was like, whoa, this is interesting.
Yep.
And all the data point to the fact that we can build this area up.
Yep.
But that as quickly as we build it up, if we don't continue to invest in things that are hard for us, that we don't want to do, that's the part that feels so Goggin-esque to me, that we don't want to do. Like if you love the ice bath, yeah, I love the ice bath, and you go from 1 minute to 10 minutes, guess what? Your anterior mid-cingulate cortex did not grow.
None.
But if you hate the cold water, if you're afraid of drowning and you get into water and put your head under and survive, then the anterior mid-cingulate cortex gets bigger. But if you don't do it the next day, or if you do it the next day and you enjoy it, because hey, I did it yesterday, woohoo, happy me, Merry Christmas, as you would say.
Merry Christmas.
Guess what? The anterior mid-cingulate cortex shrinks again.
Yep.
To me, this is one of the most important discoveries that neuroscience has ever made, because it's that I don't want to do something, but do it anyway.
That's right.
That grows this area. And it's almost like I have a friend, he's been sober 30 years from alcohol. And he always says, you know, the amazing thing about addiction is there's a cure. The problem is it only works one day at a time.
Yep.
And so you have to renew it every day.
That's right.
So the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, to me, when I learned about it, two things went off in my head. Whoa, this is super interesting. And two, I got to tell David Goggins about this. And I waited until now to tell you because I felt like well, for obvious reasons, I wanted to tell you and I wanted to tell you here.
Well, I love that because that's how I've lived my entire life. I don't know anything about that. But people go, man, you have such a strong will. It's something that you build. Like, I never forget, I was on a podcast one time, and this dude goes, you were blessed with a strong mind. Like, the hell are you talking about? I was blessed with a strong mind. That's something that you have to develop. You develop that over years, decades of suffering and going back into the suffer. That's why a lot of people who graduate Navy SEAL training, they want to know, like, I talk about it very openly all the time. A lot of guys don't want to go back into that water. Don't want to go back into the hard stuff. Maybe not anything hard in life. Once you get through it, it's like you become a POW. Like, how many POWs you know want to go back to POW camp? None. When something sucks so bad in life, this is on this that we're talking about now, very few people want to go back. They're happy they graduated. I realized I'm the same way. I don't want to go back. I have to go back. I must go back. Because that is exactly where all the knowledge of my life exists was back there and what you're talking about. Well, I didn't know anything about this, but how I grew a will was constantly doing these things to now it's just life. I wake up while it still sucks, it's just life. You don't sit back and like, oh my God, like I have days I don't want to do it, but I know I'm going to do it. I know from years of just doing it. So that's beautiful. And this is why I came on here with you today. And I'm glad that you're talking about this because human beings need to hear this. They need to stop hearing these hacks on this and that. There's no fucking hack, bro. There's no fucking hack. Yeah, you may this and that and saunas and all this yeah, it's great. There is no fucking life hack. To grow that thing, how do you grow it? Do it and do it and do it and do it. That's the hack. The hack is gonna fucking suck. And that's what I realized. Life, that's why I wanted to come on here today. I didn't want to come on here and talk about no fucking passion and purpose and how to get the fuck out of bed and how to hit a fucking alarm clock and all this catchphrase bullshit. Because that wasn't how I lived. That wasn't how I lived. I woke up like every human being does and goes, man, I'm a fucking piece of shit today. How the hell is this going to work out for me? And you fight that. You don't override it. There's no override button. It's the conversation in your head. So how do you do that? We don't have enough of these conversations about the real conversation that every human being is having. And they have no idea how to get out of it, but they do. It's that shit right there, man. You gotta build your will. How do you build your will? Exactly what you said, man. Exactly what you said.
Your knee looks pretty bad, Goggins. No fucking shit, doc. With 2 days to go in walk week, I'd come by medical for a follow-up. The doctor rolled up my camo pants, and when he gave my right kneecap a gentle squeeze, pain seized my brain, but I couldn't show it. I was playing a role. I was the beat-up, but otherwise healthy bud student ready for the fight, and I couldn't so much as grimace to pull it off. I already knew the knee was fucked, and that the odds of getting through another 5 months of training on one leg were low, but accepting another rollback meant enduring another hell week, and that was way too much to process. The swelling hasn't gone down much. How's it feel? The doctor was playing a role too. SEAL candidates had a don't ask, don't tell agreement with most of the medical staff at Naval Special Warfare Command. I wasn't about to make the doctor's job easier by revealing anything to him, and he wasn't going to take caution side and pull the ripcord on a man's dream. He lifted his hand and my pain faded. I coughed and pneumonia once again rattled in my lungs until I felt the cold truth of his stethoscope on my skin. Ever since Hell Week was called, I've been coughing up brown knots of mucus. For the first 2 days, I lay in bed day and night, spitting them into a Gatorade bottle, where I stored them like so many nickels. I could barely breathe and couldn't move much either. I may have been a bad motherfucker in Hell Week, but that shit was over, and I had to deal with the fact of the devil. And those instructors branded me too. It's all right, Doc, I said. A little stiff is all. Time is what I needed. I knew how to push through pain, and my body had almost always responded with performance. I wasn't going to quit just because my knee was barking. It would come around eventually. The doc prescribed medicine to reduce the congestion in my lungs and sinuses and gave me some Motrin for my knee. Within 2 days, my breathing improved, but I still couldn't bend my right leg. This would be a problem. Of all the moments in buds that I thought could break me, a knot tying exercise never registered on my radar. Then again, this wasn't the fucking Boy Scouts. This was an underwater knot tying drill held in the 15-foot section of the pool. And while the pool didn't strike mortal fear into me like it once did, being negatively buoyant, I knew that any pool evolution could be my undoing, especially those that demanded treading water. Even before Hell Week, we'd been tested in the pool. We had to perform mock rescues on the instructors and do a 50-meter underwater swim without fins on a single breath. That swim started with a giant stride into the water, followed by a full somersault to siphon off any moment whatsoever. Then, without kicking off the side, we swam along the lane lines to the end of our 25-meter pool. On the far side, we were allowed to kick off the wall, then swim back. When I arrived at the 50-meter mark, I rose up and gasped for air. My heart hammered until my breath smoothed, and I grasped that I'd actually passed the first of a series of complicated underwater evolutions that were supposed to teach us to be calm, cool, and collected underwater on a breath hold. The knot tying evolution was next in the series, and it wasn't about our ability to tie various knots or a way to time our max breath hold. Sure, both skills come in handy on amphibian operations, but this drill was more about our capacity to juggle multiple stressors in an environment that's not sustainable for human life. Despite my health, I was heading into the drill with some confidence. Things changed when I started treading water. That's how the drill began, with 8 students strung out across the pool, moving our hands and legs like egg beaters. That's hard enough for me on 2 good legs, but because my right knee didn't work, I was forced to tread water with just my left. That spiked the degree of difficulty and my heart rate, which sapped my energy. Each student had an instructor assigned to them for this evolution, and Psycho Pete specifically requested me. It was obvious I was struggling, and Psycho and his bruised pride were hungry for a little payback. With each revolution of my right leg, shockwaves of pain exploded like fireworks. Even with Psycho eyeballing me, I couldn't hide it. When I grimaced, he smiled like a kid on Christmas morning. "Tie a square knot, then a bowline," he shouted. I was working so hard it was difficult to catch my breath, but Psycho didn't give 2 fucks. Now, damn it. I gulped air, bent from the waist, and kicked down. There were 5 knots in the drill altogether, and each student was told to grab their 8-inch slice of rope and tie them off one at a time at the bottom of the pool. We were all allotted a breath in between, but could do as many as all 5 knots on a single breath. The instructor called out the knots, but the pacing was up to each student. We weren't allowed to use a mask or goggles to complete the evolution, and the instructor had to approve each knot with a thumbs up before we were permitted to surface. If they flashed a thumbs down instead, we had to retie that knot correctly. And if we surfaced before a given knot was approved, that meant failure and a ticket home. Once back at the surface, there was no resting or relaxing between tasks. Treading water was the constant refrain, which meant soaring heart rates and the continual burning up of oxygen in the bloodstream for the one-legged man. Translation: the dives were uncomfortable as hell, and blacking out was a real possibility. Psycho glared at me through his mask as I worked my knots. After about 30 seconds, he'd approved both and we surfaced. He breathed free and easy, but I was gasping and panting like a wet, tired dog. The pain in my knee was so bad, I felt sweat bead up on my forehead. When you're sweating in an unheated pool, you know shit f***ed up. I was breathless, low on energy, and wanted to quit. But quitting this evolution meant quitting buds altogether, and that wasn't happening. "Oh no, are you hurt, Goggins? Did you get some sand in your pussy?" Psycho asked. "I'll bet you can't do the last 3 knots on one breath." He said it with a smirk, like he was daring me. I knew the rules. I didn't have to accept his challenge, but that would have made Psycho just a little too happy, and I couldn't allow that. I nodded and kept treading water, delaying my dive until my pulse evened out and I could score one deep, nourishing breath. Psycho wasn't having it. Whenever I opened my mouth, he splashed water in my face to stress me out even more, a tactic used when trainees started to panic. That made breathing impossible. "Go under now or you fail." I'd run out of time. I tried to gulp some air before my duck dive and tasted a mouthful of Psycho splash water instead as I dove to the bottom of the pool on a negative breath hold. My lungs were damn near empty, which meant I was in pain from the jump, but I knocked the first one out in a few seconds. Psycho took his sweet time examining my work. My heart was thrumming like high alert Morse code. I felt it flip-flop in my chest, like it was trying to break through my rib cage and fly to freedom. Psycho stared at the twine, flipped it over, and perused it with his eyes and fingers before offering a thumbs up in slow motion. I shook my head, untied the rope, and hit the next one. Again, he gave it a close inspection while my chest burned and diaphragm contracted, trying to force air into my empty lungs. The pain level in my knee was at a 10. Stars gathered in my peripheral vision. Those multiple stressors had me teetering like a Jenga tower, and I felt like I was about to black out. If that happened, I'd have to depend on Psycho to swim me to the surface and bring me around. Did I really trust this man to do that? He hated me. What if he failed to execute? What if my body was too burned out that even a rescue breath couldn't rouse me? My mind was spun with those simple toxic questions that never go away. Why was I here? Why suffer when I could quit and be comfortable again? Why risk passing out or even death for a fucking knot drill? I knew that if I succumbed and bolted to the surface, my SEAL career would have ended then and there. But in that moment, I couldn't figure out why I ever gave a f***. I looked over at Psycho. He held both thumbs up and sported a big, goofy smile on his face like he was watching a damn comedy show. His split second of pleasure in my pain reminded me of all the bullying and taunts I felt as a teenager, but instead of playing the victim and letting negative emotions sap my energy and force me to the surface, a failure, it was as if a new light blazed in my brain that allowed me to flip that script. Time stood still as I realized for the first time that I'd always looked at my entire life, everything I'd been through, from the wrong perspective. Yes, all the abuse I'd experienced and the negativity I had to push through challenged me to the core. But in that moment, I stopped seeing myself as the victim of bad circumstance and saw my life as the ultimate training ground instead. My disadvantages had been callousing my mind all along and had prepared me for that moment in that pool with Psycho Pete. I remember my very first day in the gym back in Indiana. My palms were soft and quickly got torn up on the bars because they weren't accustomed to gripping steel. But over time, after thousands of reps, my palms built up a thick callus as protection. The same principle works when it comes to mindset. Until you experience hardships like abuse and bullying, failures and disappointments, your mind will remain soft and exposed. Life experience, especially negative experiences, helps callous the mind. But it's up to you where that callus lines up. If you choose to see yourself as a victim of circumstance into adulthood, that callus will become resentment that protects you from the unfamiliar. It will make you too cautious and untrusting and possibly too angry at the world. It will make you fearful of change and hard to reach, but not hard of mind. That's where I was as a teenager. But after my second hell week, I'd become someone new. I'd fought through so many horrible situations by then and remained open and ready for more. My ability to stay open represented a willingness to fight for my own life, which allowed me to withstand hailstorms of pain and use it to callous over my victim's mentality. That was gone, buried under layers of sweat and hard fucking flesh, and I was starting to callous over my fears too. That realization gave me the mental edge I needed to outlast Psycho Pete one more time, to show him he couldn't hurt me anymore. I smiled back, and the feeling of being on the edge of a blackout went away. Suddenly, I was energized. The pain faded, and I felt like I could stay under all day. Psycho saw that in my eyes. I tied off the last knot at a leisurely pace, glaring at him the whole time. He gestured with his hands for me to hurry up as his diaphragm contracted. I finally finished. He gave me a quick affirmative and kicked to the surface, desperate for a breath. I took my time, joined him topside and found him gasping, while I felt strangely relaxed. When the chips were down at the pool during Air Force pararescue training, I'd buckled. This time, I won a major battle in the water. It was a big victory, but the war wasn't over. After I passed the knot tying evolution, we had 2 minutes to climb out onto the deck, get dressed, and head back to the classroom. During first phase, that's usually plenty of time, but a lot of us, not just me, were still healing from Hell Week and not moving at our typical lightning pace. On top of that, once we got through Hell Week, Class 231 went through a bit of an attitude adjustment. Hell Week is designed to show you that a human is capable of much more than you know. It opens your mind to the true possibilities of human potential, and with that comes a change in your mentality. You no longer fear cold water or doing push-ups all day. You realize that no matter what they do to you, they will never break you, so you don't rush as much to make their arbitrary deadlines. You know, if you don't make it, the instructors will beat you down, meaning push-ups, getting wet and sandy, anything to up the pain and discomfort quotient. But for those of us knuckle draggers still in the mix, our attitude was, so the be it. None of us feared the instructors anymore, and we weren't about to rush. They didn't like that one damn bit. I had seen a lot of beatdowns while at Bud's, but the one we received that day will go down as one of the worst in history. We did push-ups until we couldn't pick ourselves up off the deck. Then they turned us on our backs and demanded flutter kicks. Each kick was torture for me. I kept putting my legs down because of the pain. I was showing weakness, and if you show weakness, it is on. Psycho and SBG descended and took turns on me. I went from push-ups to flutter kicks to bear crawls until they got tired. I could feel the moving parts of my knees shifting, floating, and grabbing every time I bent it to do those bear crawls, and it was agonizing. I moved slower than normal and knew I was broken. That simple question bubbled up again. Why? What was I trying to prove? Quitting seemed the sane choice. The comfort of mediocrity sounded like sweet relief until Psycho screamed in my ear, "Move faster, motherfucker." Once again, an amazing feeling washed over me. I wasn't focused on outdoing him this time. I was in the worst pain of my life, but my victory in the pool minutes before came rushing back. I'd finally proved to myself that I was a decent enough waterman to belong in the Navy SEALs. Heady stuff for a negatively buoyant kid that never took a swim lesson in his entire life. And the reason I got there was because I put in the work. The pool had been my kryptonite. Even though I was a far better swimmer as a SEAL candidate, I was still so stressed about water evolutions that I used to hit the pool after a day of training, at least 3 times a week. I scaled a 15-foot fence just to gain after-hours access. Other than the academic aspect, nothing scared me as much about the prospects of butters like the swimming drills, and by dedicating time, I was able to callous over that fear and hit new levels underwater when the pressure was on. I thought about the incredible power of a calloused mind on task as Psycho and SBG beat me down, and that thought became a feeling that took over my body and made me move as fast as a bear around that pool. I couldn't believe what I was doing. The intense pain was gone, and so were those nagging questions. I was putting out harder than ever, breaking through the limitations of injury and pain tolerance, and riding a second wind delivered by a callous mind. After the bear crawls, I went back to doing flutter kicks, and I still had no pain. As we were leaving the pool a half hour later, SBG asked, "Goggins, what got into your ass to make you Superman?" I just smiled and left the pool. I didn't want to say anything because I didn't yet understand what I now know. Similar to using an opponent's energy to gain an advantage, leaning on your callous mind in the heat of battle can shift your thinking as well. Remembering what you've been through and how that has strengthened your mindset can lift you out of a negative brain loop and help you bypass those weak 1-second impulses to give in so you can power through obstacles. And when you leverage a calloused mind like I did around the pool that day and keep fighting through pain, It can help you push your limits because if you accept the pain as a natural process and refuse to give in and give up, you will engage the sympathetic nervous system, which shifts your hormonal flow. The sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight reflex. It's bubbling just below the surface. And when you are lost, stressed out, or struggling, like I was when I was a down and out kid, that's the part of your mind that's driving the bus. We've all tasted this feeling before. Those mornings when going on a run is the last thing you want to do. But then 20 minutes into it, you feel energized. That's the work of the sympathetic nervous system. What I've found is that you can tap into it on call as long as you know how to manage your own mind. When you indulge in negative self-talk, the gifts of a sympathetic response will remain out of reach. However, if you can manage those moments of pain that come with maximum effort by remembering what you've been through to get to that point in your life, you will be in a better position to persevere and choose fight over flight. That will allow you to use the adrenaline that comes with a sympathetic response to go even harder. Obstacles at work and school can also be overcome with your calloused mind. In those cases, pushing through a given flashpoint isn't likely to lead to a sympathetic response, but it will keep you motivated to push through any doubt you feel about your own abilities. No matter the task at hand, there is always opportunity for self-doubt. Whenever you decide to follow a dream or set a goal, you are just as likely to come up with all the reasons why the likelihood of success is low. Blame it on the f***ed up evolutionary wiring of the human mind. But you don't have to let your doubt into the cockpit. You can tolerate doubt as a backseat driver, but if you put doubt in the pilot's seat, defeat is guaranteed. Remembering that you've been through difficulties before and have always survived to fight again shifts the conversation in your head. It will allow you to control and manage doubt and keep you focused on taking each and every step necessary to achieve the task at hand. Sounds simple, right? It isn't. Very few people even bother to try to control the way their thoughts and doubts bubble up. The vast majority of us are slaves to our minds. Most don't even make the first effort when it comes to mastering their thought process because it's a never-ending chore and impossible to get right every time. The average person thinks 2,000, 3,000 thoughts per hour. That's 30 to 50 per minute. Some of those shots will slip by the goalie. It's inevitable, especially if you coast through life. Physical training is the perfect crucible to learn how to manage your thought process because when you're working out, your focus is more likely to be single-pointed and your response to stress and pain is immediate and measurable. Do you hammer hard and snag that personal best like you said you would, or do you crumble? That decision rarely comes down to physical ability. It's almost always a test of how well you are managing your own mind. If you push yourself through each split and use that energy to maintain a strong pace, you have a great chance of recording a faster time. Granted, some days it's easier to do that than others, and the clock or the score doesn't matter anyway. The reason it's important to push hardest when you want to quit the most is because it helps you callous your mind. It's the same reason why you have to do your best work when you are the least motivated. That's why I love pizza and Buddhism and why I still love it today. Physical challenges strengthen my mind so I'm ready for whatever life throws at me, and it will do the same for you. But no matter how well you deploy it, a calloused mind can't heal broken bones. On the mile-long hike back to the Buds compound, the feeling of victory evaporated, and I could feel the damage I'd done. I had 20 weeks of training in front of me, dozens of evolutions ahead, and I could barely walk. While I wanted to deny the pain in my knee, I knew I was so I limped straight to medical. When he saw my knee, the doc didn't say a damn thing. He just shook his head and sent me to get an x-ray that revealed a fractured kneecap. In Buds, when reservists sustain injuries that take a long time to heal, they're sent home, and that's what happened to me. I crutched my ass back to the barracks, demoralized, and while checking out, I saw some of the guys that quit during Hell Week. When I first glimpsed their helmets lined up beneath the bell, I felt sorry for them because I knew the empty feeling of giving up. But seeing them face to face reminded me that failure is a part of life, and now we all had to press on. I hadn't quit, so I knew I'd be invited back. But I had no idea if that meant a third hell week or not, or if after getting rolled twice, I still had the burning desire to fight through another hurricane of pain with no guarantee of success. Given my injury record, how could I